Hi, and welcome everybody. My name is Ben, and today I'm your host for this session. This session, which is going to be about DataMiner DevOps professionals. So we want to have a chat about, you know, very important people, I would say. People that have specific skill sets to do specific things with a data miner system and the role they can play in the future of your operation. This is a very important role. I call it a cornerstone for any digital transformation program. It's a very important key strategic asset to have. People that have certain skills and capabilities that can use a data miner platform, which is a transformational platform, and leverage it on a day-to-day basis to evolve your operation. And this is something that applies throughout the industry. And today I want to talk a little bit about why is DevOps very important? What is it exactly? What kind of challenges are there? What kind of things do you have to pay attention to? Because quite often there's also quite a few misperceptions around what DevOps is exactly. A lot of people sometimes believe like, yeah, well, we know about this, but if you talk about it, there's a lot of details that you have to look into. And one of the key things that I definitely want to address today is also the fact that, DevOps is not about pure hardcore software industry. Okay, DevOps is a principle that starts applying in more and more spaces everywhere around us. And that's why I would like to kind of draw a little bit of a parallel also with some of our internal operation, something completely unrelated to this type of business, the kind of business that we typically do with a data miner system. But take the example of our sales team. Our sales team in the past has always worked with out of the box kind of CRM solutions that allow them to manage their contacts, their proposals, their quotes. Today, this sales team here at Skyline has moved completely towards a different generation of technology, more specifically Office 365 with Power Automate and Power Apps and all of that. And essentially with this transformational technology, they have really replaced the existing legacy CRM environments. But the most important thing about that entire exercise is the fact that the people that build the workflows, the people that build the apps and the tools and everything around it and evolve it on a daily, day-to-day basis, those are the sales managers themselves. And that's one of the key benefits here that you have when you have a DevOps operation. You have the people that know the business, that know the environment that they work in, and they take full ownership and responsibility of doing the tooling around it. And that's really where you start seeing all the benefits that you're looking for, that continuous evolution, that very efficient operation. So, and I wanted just to kind of draw that parallel, and I will get back to that parallel because it shows that very simple example shows exactly what this is about. Because too many times people believe like, hey, DevOps, this is all about people that do coding and all of that. And because of technology evolutions and new generations of software solutions, similar to DataMiner, for example, you will see that this is not really the key thing. The key thing is really the concept of continuous evolution, being able to really have a very agile operation. Now, before we get started, I think it's very important to understand the context. Okay, why are we talking about this? And I think in the past, most of us or a lot of us have seen a lot of technology evolutions. We have seen technology evolutions, for example, where we would migrate from SD to HD and all kinds of other technology evolutions in different domains. But in those cases, we were going from one technology to another, but the way we were running our business, the way we were organizing our business, our workflows, the type of business was not really fundamentally changing. So the key thing that is happening today is the fact that all the new technology that becomes available is basically enabling technology, transformational technology. That's a very important thing to understand. We are moving from legacy connectivity to all IP connectivity in the media industry, in the broadband industry, etc. We are replacing hardware components by software components that gives us a lot of flexibility. We can spin it up, we can tear it down, etc. We are moving more and more of our workloads into the cloud because we get access to more and more sophisticated cloud services. And the key thing is this is transformational technology. It doesn't do just one thing. No, it enables us to be creative, to create and design solutions which are really tailored to our business, to our strategy, to our go-to-market strategy and all of that. So a lot of benefits, definitely. A lot of benefits in the sense that I have scalability. I can have resilience, more resilience than ever before. There's untapped potential in there. my creativity, I can unleash it and really make my ideas, my innovative ideas, a reality. I have almost infinite options to leverage that environment. At the same time, of course, you have to be very aware also that this new environment brings you a lot of new challenges, okay? Typically, you will have to deal with things like complexity. These environments can become very, very complex. It's very hard to see if something goes wrong. Where exactly is it going wrong and why is it going wrong? Nonlinear behavior. Nonlinear behavior is I do something which seems very trivial and I think it's a very simple thing. And then suddenly I have to realize that the entire environment is down. This is the reason why we see sometimes, for example, global outages on major platforms like Facebook or WhatsApp and all that. It's because of nonlinear behavior. People do something which they believe is harmless and very trivial, and suddenly there's big consequences of that. It's also about security. We know that we live in a world where security is a major challenge, and not having a secure environment can have big consequences. So security should be top of mind. It's one of the big challenges. The apparent state of stability, a lot of resilience, a lot of, options there to make sure that whatever happens in that environment, certain failures, you could lose half of a data center and still be up and running. But there's a lot of symptoms, okay? I have retransmissions of packets, for example. I have error corrections going on. I have services being rerouted. Those are important things to pick up on. My services are still okay, but I'm in a state of apparent stability. I need to be able to pick up on those symptoms and respond to it. So that's the new environment. And now to get to the point again, infinite options. Infinite options means it becomes impossible to anticipate what the future is going to look like. Business models could change very quickly. You could have new customer demands, for example, popping up, new customers coming to you with new expectations, new value propositions, maybe a complete new competitor coming to the market with new services that are going to compete for your business. So all of that is very important to understand that this is something that you have to deal with. And how do you deal with that? Agility. Agility in your operation, agility in your business. Agility is the ability to move ahead continuously and to change direction, whenever it's needed. So it's very important to understand that building agility in a business, in an operation, is a big challenge. This is not just about technology. This is equally about people, how you organize a company, how you set up a company, and how you act and how you behave. So it's about a lot of things, but that's the whole essence of the future that we're moving into. And this applies to pretty much any type of business that you have, and definitely to our type of business. Now, you could say in the past, we always had a habit of using legacy bespoke technology. We plan, the technology was pretty much the same for everybody, and we plan basically to install a certain infrastructure or a certain type of platform. We install that platform and we operate that platform for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Today, every single company, every single organization, I don't care. Even if you're in the real estate or you're a hospital or an insurance business, more and more, we all become software ICT companies. And in a software ICT environment with that unlimited options, you can continuously move ahead. So you find yourself in a world where you can create. You can be creative, you can be innovative with your business models, you go to market strategy and all those things, and you can leverage that enabling technology to create. We no longer plan and just deploy, we create. And then you start operating, but while you are operating, you're continuously evolving. That's the world of software and ICT, okay? And that starts applying pretty much to any type of business. But we have to realize, especially the companies that make the transition from one to the other, that this is a fundamental different world. This is much more than technology. This is impacting on everything you can think of. Any aspect of the business, the way you design your business models, the way you operate and organize your teams, the way you set it up, the way you do your product management, everything really changes. Now, we have to keep in mind, software ICT used to be something very specific. Today, there's like thousands and thousands of different flavors of ICT technology. ICT technology, for example, in the media, is a completely different animal as compared to a data center. So it's still very industry specific. but a lot of the general concepts start applying. Now, ultimately, that's what we do. Digital transformation. It goes to the heart of what DataMiner is all about. It's the whole concept of saying, hey, we have all these technologies out there. Could be investments in all IP infrastructure. It could be investments in cloud infrastructure. It could be all kinds of different things. But you have that technology, that enabling technology with all that flexibility and that really, great potential to do beautiful things. We have to be aware. We want to leverage the benefits, scalability, resilience, all those things that I mentioned. At the same time, we have to deal with complexity, nonlinearity, security challenges, apparent stability. And if you know about these things, you can actually build them into your core of your system so that, for example, security is not an afterthought. It's something that comes automatically because of the architecture and the way you design the system. But the whole point of digital transformation is all about, for example, building technology workflows in the first place, being able to essentially design workflows, for example, to give you a very simple example, to replace an IP switch. Because in the past, if you would build a technology environment, you would trust your firewall. You would plan, install, and deploy something. And today, and that's a harsh reality, there are a lot of systems out there, for example, where IP switch fabrics will run on firmware, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Now, if you understand the current cybersecurity climate, if you understand the concept of zero trust, we don't just trust the firewall, zero trust. And if you understand that, if you look at cybersecurity, that the vast majority of cyber incidents is caused by vulnerabilities for which a patch already exists, you know that you have to adapt to standard ICT procedures. And standard ICT procedures are, if there's a new firmware version for my switch fabric, I should be able to roll it out very easily and conveniently. I shouldn't be afraid of having to do that. It has to come natural. That's, for example, a very small, simple example. Of course, technology workflows are also there to provision your environment. And ultimately, what it is that you want to achieve, just to wrap it up on digital transformation, you want to empower employees. You want to provide people easy access and secure and safe to all the information there, wherever it's coming from, okay? And even if I plug in a new technology today, I need all my teams, whatever their mission is, finance, engineering, capacity management, operations, I don't care. Everybody needs easy access to all the information and all the data coming from that environment. Engagement with customers, also very, very important. Today, we need to collaborate. We need to work together between organizations and companies. We live in a platform industry. The strength of your platform largely depends on your ability to make connections with other platforms. People expect digital experiences through portals, through APIs, or whatever it may be. You have to be able to make those digital connections easily, on the fly, continuously, irrespective of the underlying technology. Optimizing operation, very important. You invested maybe $10 million or $100 million in very expensive switch fabric. You want to make sure that you can utilize that switch fabric, not only to carry the services that you have today, but also new emerging services or support new standards, for example, or to create a converged infrastructure where you can have multiple teams or multiple parts of your operation using the same switch fabric. That's the future. That's taking benefit of all the power of IP connectivity and also the future potential. And it's also about, for example, cloud services. It's a good example also of optimizing your operation. A lot of people are very enthusiastic about the cloud. It's on demand. I don't have to make major upfront investments. I can get started very quickly. But you really have to manage the utilization of those services. It's not only about spinning up resources, it's also about tearing them down, making sure that you don't pay for something that you don't use. So that's also a challenge. That's also an example of optimizing your operation. And last but not least, it's about transforming, evolving your solution offering. And that's really what DataMiner is all about. It sits there at the center and makes that kind of capabilities possible. DataMiner by itself is a transformational technology. Now, DevOps. Okay, why is DevOps so important? First of all, what is it? And you can read it there. It's a standard definition. DevOps is the combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increase an organization's ability to deliver applications and service at high velocity. Okay? And this is very important. The first thing there, cultural philosophies, practices, tools. This is not just about deploying certain technologies. Okay? This is about much more than that. It's really a very multifaceted undertaking. It is something that you really have to look into and carefully review on how you're going to build a DevOps culture, how you're going to build a DevOps environment. It's really something that deserves a lot of attention. It's much more than just deploying technology. And the ultimate goal is that continuous evolution. The ability to basically say, I'm not just going to deploy an IP infrastructure to sit there and nobody wants to touch it and nobody's going to touch it. That's what we did in the past. We would install it, we would not touch it. Today, just even, for cybersecurity reasons, you cannot afford not being able to introduce a new firmware version, for example. And that's only one small example of a continuous evolution that you have to support in your operation. So that's what DevOps is all about. And it is very important. Why is it very important? It's essentially an absolute must in any operation tomorrow. It's something that is so fundamental. It's something that goes to the heart of all the advantages that we could have from all that enabling and transformational technology. It really allows you to continuously deliver on small incremental, updates, small updates and increases of value that you can deliver. That's essentially what it is all about. Now, what do you need then? Number one, transformational technology. Okay, all IP investments in cloud infrastructure and a lot of other things. You start with transformational technology that will enable you to do many different things. Now, pay attention. It doesn't have to be too fancy. Keep in mind that even products like DataMiner, for example, can take a legacy piece of hardware and actually virtualize it to become a more transformational technology itself. But that's not the only thing. Anybody can purchase cloud services. Anybody can install switches and routers. Anybody can, fire up a piece of software. But it's all about how are you then going to build a composable architecture? And with composable, I mean like a symphony. I can compose, I can really use and leverage that infrastructure in a very agile and a very, 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 simple way. And that's a big challenge. So how do you bring all that technology together in a way that you can leverage the current potential, but also the future potential? So building that composable architecture is extremely important. I've seen plenty of examples where people start deploying transformational technology, but then use all kinds of legacy tools around it so that you would say like, well, why did you move from the old generation to this generation? You just hard-coded all your workflows. Nobody's going to touch it. Nobody dares to even update a firmware version. So what is going to be the advantage of this? And in addition to that, as if it's not complex enough, you also need to change your entire organization. It's about the agile culture and mindset, the way teams operate and are organized and make decisions and move forward. So all of those three components are extremely important to start moving towards a DevOps type of environment. Now, it's pretty simple if you look at it from a time and cost perspective, okay? If you look at the blue line is the traditional way of working. We would plan, install, and deploy a system, and then we would run it at a minimal cost for a certain given time, okay? We run it until basically there's a new generation and we have to move on. The light blue line that you see over here is the DevOps track. The DevOps track, which is essentially the alternative way of doing the exact same thing. Now, there's a big difference, of course. In the beginning of the project, you will see that DevOps requires an effort. It requires an effort because it's not just about deploying an all IP solution. It's not just about, starting to use some cloud services. You need infrastructure around that. CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, maybe code repositories or other things. You need tooling and environment. You need also training and knowledge. Just to draw the parallel again with what I said about our sales team. The old way would be to have a legacy, standard out-of-the-box CRM solution that you start using very quickly, and you use it for 4 or 5 years. In this case, there was an additional investment to allow room and time for people in the sales team to actually learn about new tools, new ways of working. In this case, Power Apps and Power Automate, for example, from Office 365. But it's a useful investment because it's about acquiring training and knowledge and expertise. Now, this is not a real big problem, okay? If this period of time would be 5 to 6 years, if this is 5 to 6 years, you would probably work the traditional way. The only problem is with the technology evolutions that we have today, you have to realize that these cycles, this time over here is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, okay? So very quickly, you run into a new wall, okay? You basically have that initial deployment, and then things start happening. First of all, maybe loss of opportunity. I have a certain infrastructure, the demands of the customers are changing, their expectations are changing, I cannot deliver it. I have a rigid infrastructure, I cannot leverage the full power of it, it's proprietary, it's bespoke, it's vendor specific, or whatever it may be. I'm facing a huge cost to do a redesign or a complete migration, for example. Another incident could be a major security incident. The cost of a security incident can be dramatic, okay? Simply because I don't have the tools to implement really zero trust and make sure that everything is up to date. Today, we live in a different climate. It could be about cloud service provider lock-in. I started working with one cloud service provider. I took a lot of shortcuts. I didn't think about DevOps and continuous evolution, and suddenly I hit a wall. I'm locked into a specific cloud service provider. Or for example, inefficient utilization. I invested a lot in all IP or other types of infrastructure, and I use it very well out of the box, proprietary tools and all of that. But suddenly I have to realize that I'm only using 10% of the capacity of what I would be able to do with that IP infrastructure. And my competitors that are ahead of me and chose a different track have that ability and start becoming more competitive. And again, you can take those shortcuts. And that is the old way of working. And that was acceptable when this time span was 5 to 6 years. But this is getting, again, shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's why a DevOps track is really all about making additional investments upfront, additional infrastructure around your operational infrastructure. This is not only about moving, for example, towards a new generation of technology, but making sure you have that infrastructure around it to give people the time to basically train and to upskill with certain tools and capabilities that are new to them, that they can leverage to make that DevOps. So if that DevOps continues, at some point you will see something like this, okay? And again, in the past, multiple years. Right now, this is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So you're getting very quickly to this kind of situation where you have to realize that going through all those very short iterations of legacy technology that you get with a very big sunk cost. It's a complete waste of money. It's a waste of money because it's all about redesigning, migrations, the cost of security incidents, changing cloud provider, for example, loss of opportunity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So DevOps is really going to the heart of what it is, when you want to operate efficiently in a very fast evolving landscape. Now, to move on, in a DataMiner system, I'm going to take a very high level look at DataMiner here, just for the people that are not too familiar with it. We're not going to spend too much time on it because I don't want to talk too much about DataMiner. But if you look at DataMiner from a very high level perspective, it's pretty simple. At the bottom, it starts with the foundation, which is a data collection and control plane. Now, we are very renowned for that specific type of technology because with a DataMiner system, you can be rest assured whatever data you have, whatever source of data, whatever protocol, it could be files that you ingest and need to index, it could be SNMP standard protocols, it could be APIs and SOAP and whatever you can imagine. This is already proven with over 7,000 integrations. Next step, after the integration, we have that digital twin, okay? A digital twin that allows you to basically have an in-memory, consolidated, entirely secure, real-time updated copy of your entire operation. That's what it's all about, across any vendor and technology domains. A digital twin is basically the foundation of any digital transformation. This is the way it should be done today. In the past, and this is also one of the strengths of DataMiner, because this was going to the heart of the concept of DataMiner. This is fundamentally different. We were even doing this, when people were still talking about managers of managers and having the illusion that you can take alarm events and bring them together and correlate towards a root cause. No, this is a completely different concept. On top of the digital twin, you have your data consumption. Now, data consumption has to be open, and that's also the way it is in a DataMiner system. You can tap into that with functions and capabilities that come out of the box with DataMiner system, or you could choose to have other tools that you integrate with the environment. Again, it depends on your environment, it depends on your strategy, it depends on what you have already in your infrastructure, what you're missing, and all of that. Because if we zoom in a little bit, on the top there, we have the data consumption. Now, these are just the different categories. If you zoom in a little bit more, you will see that DataMiner is essentially a large collection of functions, pre-integrated functions. Of course, it starts at the bottom with data collectors. So, and you can already see, you can do some DevOps engineering here, integrating with new data sources. But you could say like, well, for me, DataMiner is primarily a data collector. I use and leverage the strength of DataMiner to be able to access any data very easily and conveniently. And then I go and ship it off immediately via data offloading, for example, to another platform because I already have some other tooling there. That's perfectly possible. Other people will move ahead and say, hey, I'm going to leverage the service management capabilities. In other words, I'm going to start picking data from the digital twin to provide an end-to-end real-time service perspective. Or maybe you want to use fault management, or maybe you want to use some of the AI capabilities. Although you can also, again, you can ship off the data and you can also do that with other functions from other providers. You can also provide all of this AI functionality to generate more faults and essentially through northbound APIs, for example, ship it off to your fault management. So there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different paths, and we can do that in the domain of orchestration and automation. We can do that in the domain of configuration and resource discovery. So for example, here you could say like, well, you know what, I don't really have a good solid inventory management solution, so I'm going to leverage these functions to do automated resource discovery. I want to detect automatically if somebody plugs in a new switch or a new router or something like that, or I spin up a new cloud service. Or maybe you have it already, and in that case, you can easily integrate DataMiner with an external source and use that as your inventory. But then you can still use, for example, and say, hey, despite the fact that I use an external inventory, I'm going to use the firmware management capability because that's something I'm still lacking. So you see, this is a landscape of functions which come pre-integrated out of the box that can be used by DevOps engineers in many different ways. And just for sake of completeness, if your DataMiner system is cloud connected, you can make your DataMiner system cloud connected just in a few minutes. It's a registration. It's a secure, single secure connection that you set up. You suddenly add a whole range of other services on top of the ones that I showed you already. So on top of all the functions that I have there, I can have a number of services like, for example, dashboard sharing or API sharing. If I want to make a connection, for example, with a third party, I can easily share, for example, a live dashboard in a secure fashion, and I don't have to care where the data is coming from. Now, I just want to say, if we look at this from a DevOps perspective, these are just some examples. So DataMiner DevOps professionals are people that can leverage the transformational capabilities of a DataMiner system. For example, you could invest in expertise around data ingest. We have these powerful connectors in a DataMiner system, but anybody can make them. Anybody can design them. Anybody can evolve those. We even have all the tooling around that. So we have the ability, we have our integration studio that can be used and leveraged to empower people to make data connectors, to test and validate them in a very easy and convenient manner. There's the example of automation and orchestration. And again, automation and orchestration, you will see, for example, that you have a coding option, but you also have, for more simple procedures, a more graphical approach. And this is already a good example to kind of indicate DevOps is not necessarily about hardcore programming. That used to be the case a long time ago, but with the evolutions of the tools that we see today, you also need to think DevOps when you think of people, for example, that will create visualizations, different graphics. If you can leverage, for example, DataMiner dashboards and all the features and capabilities in there, as new data sources come into your system, because you have a DevOps engineer, for example, that integrates in the morning, In the afternoon, you can already be plugging in that data in that dashboard together with all the other data from other sources you have. You can say, for example, hey, I'm going to use that cloud function to share that dashboard instantly with a third party. Or I can go and grab that data and go to Microsoft Teams and basically interrogate that data. And the same for visual overview. And these are just some examples. There's a lot more detail to it. For example, if you go into a more sophisticated orchestration solution, we can break it down into, for example, profile loading. Profile loading is a specific capability, and you can train a DevOps engineer to do that. Now, these are just some examples of what I'm talking about. But the key thing that you have to think about when you move into DevOps and you move into this new world, one of the key things is your iteration speed, okay? Because that's the whole thing. You're going into a world with unlimited options. So it's very difficult to anticipate everything, every obstacle, every option, etc. You have a goal. You know where you want to go. You know what you want to achieve. And as you start moving forward, you have to start moving forward without having this full-fledged plan. You start moving forward and you uncover the options and you start building and you're working towards that. That's the whole concept of Agile. But one thing that is very important in an Agile world is the speed at which you can iterate. Now, if one person over here, if you can do it with one person, and that one person is our sales manager over here. Our sales manager has a perfect knowledge of all the processes in sales. He knows where the bottlenecks are or the challenges, and he knows where the important things are in that part of the operation. He understands that part of the business very well. But he's also the one that is empowered by Power Apps and, for example, Power Automate and Office 365. So that means that this person on a day-to-day basis can make continuous iterations. He's making the iterations in his head. As he is designing, he is already making smart decisions towards, I was thinking to do it this way, but now that I started doing this, I kind of start seeing things, certain obstacles or certain things that are not exactly the way I wanted it, was expecting it, and I'm going to adapt. So those iterations are happening, okay? Iteration speed is very important. And of course, you will typically work with multiple people, okay? You could have different people in a team, different sales managers, different people with skills to do certain developments, whether that be on DataMiner or, for example, on Office 365. It's a complete similar situation. The only important thing there is try to make sure that it stays within the same team. As soon as you go and you transition towards salespeople that have to interact with an IT department, for example, to do this for them, you start really slowing down big time. You have to have all the mechanisms in place to have alignment. You have to have people that explain what it is that they try to achieve, which is not an easy thing, okay? There's a lot of details to it. Then somebody needs to implement it. It has to be reviewed. So those cycles start becoming longer and more intensive in terms of spending energy on keeping aligned and making sure things are happening. So again, if you look at DevOps, the key thing is that iteration speed, empowerment, and making sure that you create an environment where people can do things quickly, continuously, and easily. And that's also why you shouldn't think of DevOps as only and exclusively for pure hardcore software engineering. To give you an example, in DataMiner, we have our no-code apps. What's the purpose of the no-code apps for people that don't know? Confidence monitoring, Studio Manager over here, and my booking manager. These seem to be three standalone programs amongst all the programs I have on my computer. But these are no-code apps in DataMiner. In DataMiner, you can actually go and on the fly create an app like this one. This one is just an example. There's like millions of options. But this one is, for example, managing all the infrastructure we have on an Azure deployment, all our resources, our Kubernetes clusters, our gateways, our data storage, etc. I created an app where I bundled all the information from my digital twin and bundled it together to provide an app to one of my colleagues who needs that information. I can also, in the same environment, say, hey, I have a studio facility, for example. I'm going to empower those people to use and leverage the data. And these apps with all the menus and the drop-down menus and all the components are very easy to build. You don't need to know any coding. So this gives me the option to say, you know what? I'm going to transform that team into a DevOps team. I'm going to give some space and time and room for some of those people to learn about how to do this, how to build these apps. And they can essentially then take full ownership and start making short iterations. They know their business, they know what they want to achieve, they know what the priorities are, and they can make a perfect decision. This evolution or this capability in the app would give us this benefit. It's going to take us one day to do it. Is it worth doing it? So continuously making that value evaluation, effort versus value that will be delivered, without having to interact beyond the boundaries of that team. So DevOps is really something where you can start looking, the same way we did it for our sales team, for example, not a classic CRM anymore, but an enabling environment, allowing people to get the opportunity to skill up and to use those skills within the team to continuously evolve. That's the whole concept. And of course, you need technology like DataMiner that provides that capability. Okay, so it's very important if you start looking at technology providers to understand that this is more than just doing whatever the obvious goal is, cloud services, or whether it's all IP or something else. But how is it done? What kind of features and capabilities do they give me? What kind of environment do they give me to be able to create that very valuable and strategic must-have DevOps operation? And that's what I'm always saying. If you look at, for example, a data miner system as an example again, it's an environment, first of all. In the past, it would be like this. We deploy it, people operate it, and they just monitor it. That's essentially it. And that's the core of a data miner system, of course. But it's more than that. Okay? If you're really truly looking to technology vendors that you're going to work with to be able to do things and to be able to move towards DevOps style of operation, you need to look beyond that. Okay? You need to look at the full cycle. And if you look at the full cycle, that incremental cost there, I mentioned it to you, it's about investing additional in training and knowledge for people, but also, for example, CI/CD infrastructure, tools. And those tools could be the trusted third-party tools, Visual Studio, Microsoft Visio, for example, Git, Jenkins, the classics, complemented typically with other tools provided by a technology vendor himself. It should be an open ecosystem where you have those options, because you need those. You need those to be able to make that full cycle on the DevOps. Okay, so, and this is very important. And you could say, why is there a community in there, for example? Well, a community is, for example, important. A community is important. Why? Because you want to share knowledge and expertise. You want to empower people with information. For example, in our community, you have all the training free of charge. People can start learning very targeted. They don't have to learn everything about it. They can go for the specific things that they need, that they want. Questions. You could say, well, is it that special? No, it's not special, but it allows people to interact directly with our developers, for example. If a DevOps engineer is trying to achieve something and he can't figure it out, he needs to know that if he goes to our community and he asks that question, all the people that are actually developing the DataMiner environment are sitting right there, all of them. And the people that own that piece of software will respond to the end user. Again, it's about agility, it's about short iterations and trying to gain time in that. So even things like a community are very important. It's not just about a single product, okay? It's not about a canned product, a bespoke product, or a vendor specific. No, it's really about a product, an enabling, empowering technology, and the entire environment and the entire ecosystem that goes around it. That's the environment you need to create a DevOps style of operation. And again, I could go through the entire picture, but I don't want to go through all the details, but that's what you need to do. If you look at your ecosystem, you need to start mapping everything around that. Do I have all the tools, features, and capabilities to create that environment that I need from a technology perspective? And then you can start investing. And that's typically what we do. We always tell our customers, like, okay, you come to us because you're transitioning to all IP, or you want to move some workflows to the cloud, or maybe you want to renew some legacy OSS systems, or you want to lower operational costs. There's always a reason why people come to us. Now, obviously, we're going to do the project, okay? That's a specific goal. We want to achieve that. We want to have that goal. But is that the only goal? No, by no means. That's the biggest mistake that you can make today if you understand the world that we live in. if you understand the essence of what is happening, if you understand what is key strategic towards the future, you will understand that DevOps is, for example, very important, that this is all about digital transformation. So automatically, in addition to whatever the goal is in terms of the project, you would be looking at, okay, but can we in parallel also look at, are we going to live up to the expectations and the goals defined in digital transformation? Are we going to be able to empower teams to grow and use data and to basically evolve on their own, apply those DevOps principles? Are we going to be able to easily and securely create digital connections with partners? All of those things are important. So each time we launch a project these days, what we want to do is essentially say, hey, this is the goal. We understand that goal. We're going to work on that goal. But in parallel, we also have to, for example, have a digital transformation track with specific goals. And one of those goals is obviously, because this is so critical, is to have those DataMiner DevOps professionals up and ready to move into that new world and to deliver those benefits. So in other words, you start with your goals and objectives, the delivery is there, whatever it may be. If it's an all IP environment or moving some workloads to the cloud, it could be anything. And typically those projects are also executed in quite an agile manner. In other words, we know what the goals and objectives are. We know what the expectations and requirements are, but we also understand that on the way over there, we will have a variety of options. So we want to continuously evaluate what the best options are. This is the new style of executing and deploying these systems. But at the same time, we want to make it a goal that at this point on the delivery, we have DevOps engineers embedded in your operation, ready, so to speak, the day after or the week after to start making the next iteration. And the best thing you can have is people embedded in the operation. And how do we do that? In a variety of things. There's training, there's coaching, there's certification, there's empowerment. It's even about taking those people towards the end of the project and integrating them into the actual project itself, doing tasks and being hands-on together with our team, doing things to basically reach that first milestone over here, knowing that then they can continue after that. That's really a very strategic and valuable objective. Now, if you look at it in terms of getting started and all that, I've mentioned already quite a few things to keep your eyes out for, what you need. Again, tons of free training, very important. Access to information and knowledge for people on the fly, on their time, on their schedule. We also have, for example, self-assessment, free online quizzes, because you may feel that you master already a certain capability and all that. And you can also use our development and lab systems, of course, which are free of charge, available for DataMiner DevOps professionals. Self-assessments are very good to kind of, get that first feeling of how well do I understand this, okay? But then we also have our official DataMiner certification. I highly recommend this because certification is really to make sure that people did not just follow a training, but that they really absorb and master the technology. Very important. Certification is highly recommended. It is an optional service. It's not that expensive, but certification is an important milestone in the entire process. Okay, but it's also about documentation, working on the Skyline community, providing coaching services, for example, where we have check-in moments with the DevOps engineers to go through what they're working on, how they're doing it, to answer any questions. And of course, as I said already, DataMiner as a transformational technology itself and all the tools and integrations. But keep in mind, you also have a responsibility. If you're dedicated to success, if you say like, okay, this is the way forward, this is what we want to achieve, you also have to really set this as a goal for your organization. Now, and again, a lot of people sometimes go like, yeah, but we don't have all the ICT engineers and the capacity to do that. It's not necessarily for every task that you need these days with the evolution of the technology that you need a hardcore programmer, okay? Again, and that's why I like to draw that parallel with our sales team. Our sales team is becoming a DevOps team. Why? Because they use transformational technology rather than a bespoke CRM solution. They use Office 365, Power Apps, Power Automate, and they use that basically as a transformational technology to achieve what they want to achieve. So also in a DataMiner environment, if you go and look at that, you will find all those opportunities for people to be very, very skilled at achieving a lot of things without doing hardcore programming. That's also DevOps. And I always say, the most important things when it comes to skills and expertise, I would say, is really having people that understand your business in the first place. I would say that's the number one requirement. The fact that, for example, a sales manager in Skyline is developing and evolving the workflows, that's the key thing, okay? That's what causes that person to be able to make those agile iterations continuously in his head. While he is coding, he understands what it is that he wants to achieve, and he can make decisions continuously without making something, wasting time on something he doesn't understand, only to realize during a review meeting with somebody who understands it, that's what you want to avoid. That goes to the heart of what it is that you want to achieve. So I would always say, if you look for skills and expertise, go to the domain, focus on the domain use cases in the first place. And of course, those people, try to have them embedded in the operation. As soon as you have dependencies between different departments and different teams, you have conflicts in terms of timing and priorities and all those things. No, if they are in the team, okay, if they are in the team, they can make decisions immediately. If we do this, which is going to take us 5 days, we're going to gain this. Is it worth doing? Yes or no? If you have to go to another team and you have dependencies, despite the fact that you think it's very valuable to do this and we should be doing it immediately, those people have other things on their plate. They have maybe different priorities, and it's not going to fit in. That's the key thing, what makes DevOps very powerful if you apply it on that level with that kind of approach. And of course, one of the classic things I would also say, a firm corporate mandate. Really. Okay. This is not simply about, being a manager that says, this is interesting. You know what? I'm going to order some training for these people and they're going to sit in the training. No, you have to give them a mandate. You have to allow that they spend the time to learn about new skills. Again, doesn't have to be coding skills, could be coding, but it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of and plenty of opportunity in these new transformational environments, whether that be an Office 365 or a DataMiner system, to have no-code apps, to have dashboards, for example, to do profile loading, which is much more to do with interaction and knowledge of equipment and infrastructure and services rather than doing the coding. So make sure that those people get the opportunity to skill up and to get ready to be good at this. Give them the time and the space to do that. So it means, as a manager, that you have to accept that maybe they have to slow down on other responsibilities. Or it could be very simple things. You know what? Change their job title. Make them a DataMiner DevOps professional so that people in the organization see it, can feel it, and know what the mandate is. So this is a classic one, okay? This is something that you have to pay attention to. It may seem very trivial, but giving a person the room and the space to start skilling up, to give them the proper job title and all those things, that's also things that will contribute to a healthy, really successful DevOps operation. And of course, ideally, you would be looking for people with an agile mindset who understand the need for agility, who understand some of the basic techniques on how this is supposed to work and how this is applied in practice, and maybe have some experience with some of the typical tools that are being used in that context. You want to make sure that maybe you have somebody who understands also the new world vision, okay? That this is really about going into a world with so much opportunity, with unlimited options, and to really make wise choices, to be creative, to think about, to innovate, and to translate that innovation almost on a continuous basis in real life implementations, even if it's only small increments. A single small increment on a daily basis is going to make a huge difference by the end of the year. And of course, ideally, attitude and personality, because quite often this is also about change. And if there's one thing that sometimes people resist to, it's change, okay? To be able to advocate, to really bring the change to the organization, to show the value to the organization. Okay, I'm going to have to wrap it up because I probably spoke a little longer already than intended. But, the key message really is DevOps starts applying everywhere. DevOps is going to happen everywhere. And you need to understand what the key essence is of establishing a DevOps operation. DataMiner is designed as an enabling transformational product. It is designed to create a DevOps environment on many different levels. Could be on coding levels, but also on other levels. And you really have to embrace it. And it's also your responsibility to really implement a detailed strategy, a strategy to make those things happen. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to discuss those. But that was it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again on a next live session. Have a great day.